To ask the question, what is art? One might just as well ask the question, what is life? There are no easy answers, but this program will attempt just to push the curtain of life aside for a moment to give us a clue into just what is art. This program is about a journey. It's a visual journey through the wonderful and mysterious world of modern art. In this trip, we will examine various elements such as form, line, color, perspective, and content. And we'll also study the different techniques of the masters. Like most trips, it will be filled with exciting times of discovery, as well as places that will seem a lot like at home. So for the next few moments, why don't you follow me as we travel through both familiar and uncharted courses, and as with most trips, we start from home. Let's begin with this painting of A Girl at a Mirror by one of America's most popular painters, Norman Rockwell. Painted for the cover of the Saturday Evening Post in 1954, it must have struck a chord in the hearts of everyone who picked up the magazine. Of course, that's just the point. As a magazine cover, it had to be understood by the general public. It had to be understood immediately. Who could fail to identify with this thought-provoking, melancholy pose of a young girl as she dreams in hope of someday becoming a beautiful young lady? Parents could easily identify with their own daughter's experience and, of course, search their own memories of rites of passage from girl to teen to eventually womanhood. Rockwell's paintings were enjoyed by millions of people just as they are today. Popular taste, then as now, simply means that a painting is good if it looks real and is easily understood. Surely this painting fits that category. Here we have another painting of A Girl in a Mirror by the 20th century's greatest painter, Pablo Picasso. Not that price should be the only measurement of the value of a work of art, but would it surprise you to know that this painting is worth thousands or perhaps millions more than the Rockwell, and is considered by art historians to be a masterpiece, especially when compared to the more popular illustration. For better or worse, most of us prefer paintings that are beautiful, entertaining, and easy to understand. So why is this one valued so much more? What is it about the Picasso that is so enduring? As in the Rockwell, once again we see a young girl before a mirror, which of course is the title of the painting. Perhaps she too is anticipating her impending biological turn towards maturity. Instead of a beautiful young lady, Picasso here has chosen to paint a distorted, translucent figure, displaying what appears to be a kind of X-ray vision. We see a spinal cord and internal organs which are apparently associated with the reproductive process. Surrounded by a halo of sunny cadmium yellow on the light side of the face, the girl appears relatively serene when compared to the rather demonic apparition in the mirror. Wow, quite a difference, isn't there? Was Picasso, like Rockwell, trying to symbolize a sense of preteen innocence as opposed to the marred specter in the mirror? Unlike Rockwell's more relaxed pose, Picasso paints the girl's arm reaching across the mirror, perhaps trying to fend off the inevitable ravages of time. It also serves to unite the otherwise divided vertical halves of the canvas, compositionally as well as psychologically. The reflection in the mirror could possibly be a symbol of death with its dark-colored face and sunken eye cavities. This distorted, agitated treatment is hardly uplifting, beautiful, or entertaining, but it is a powerful symbol of an idea. By its very distortion, it becomes an expression of human emotion. The Rockwell appeals to us because it tells a typical American story, as opposed to the Picasso, whose symbolic power would be destroyed if it were reduced to a predictable, realistic image. The interest in the Rockwell painting begins and ends with the painting itself, while the Picasso is an interpretation of life, whose meaning lies well beyond the painting itself into larger questions of life and death. Have I changed your mind as to which painting you like? Well, probably not. And that's not the purpose of this journey. I do, however, want you to be able to see all the sights on this trip through the entire world of art. The more things change, the more they really stay the same. And that applies to the art world as well. If our artistic journey were to begin a long time ago with this Egyptian fresco and end with this early 20th century painting by Gauguin, we might be surprised to find we've come full circle around the world, both figuratively and literally. The artist in both paintings freely distorted the human form in order to intensify our visual and emotional response to their work. The use of distortion is not modern at all. We not only find it in early Egyptian murals, we also see it in this early 12th century illuminated manuscript of St. John the Evangelist. The drapery folds around the shoulders and the circular movements around the knees are not unlike the rhythms of the Picasso. The repetition of plant-like forms found in the decorative border, as well as the figures, unites the entire piece with an energetic rhythm. The saint reaches for ink supplied to him by one of the figures in the frame, and it's probably one of the abbots that produced the manuscript itself. God, in the guise of the Holy Spirit, whispers the sacred scripture to St. John. Realism, as we've come to know and love it in Western culture, was really not used until the 14th and 15th centuries, in a period of art known as the Renaissance. The word Renaissance simply means rebirth. It's a rebirth of the art and ideas of the early Greeks and Romans. Even here we see distortion, but this time the figure is presented in the ideal proportion found in early Greek classical sculpture. Eventually, in the Baroque period, the forms and figures become what we consider real. Look at how realistic and solidly the figures and faces are painted. By throwing the faces in harsh light and shade, Caravaggio can create a high degree of illusionary form. The space becomes real, very real, and three-dimensional. This new realistic phenomena is a result of the Roman Church's attempt to counter the Protestant Reformation by appealing with startling and raw emotion to the popular audience. The more real the painting, the more intense the religious experience. The Protestant Reformation led to a radical decline in religious images, especially in Northern Europe. Painted in Holland about 50 years after the Caravaggio, Frans Hals does a painting of this gregarious gentleman in an altogether different free-flow style of painting. A closer look demonstrates a unique technical agility of being able to place one stroke of paint against another without much attention paid to careful blending, as seen in previous paintings. The shadows on the sides of the eyes, underneath the nose, and the bottom of the mouth are placed deftly, with few unaltered strokes. It gives the entire painting a unique air of spontaneity, unparalleled in art history. We can see how radical Hals' styles of painting was when we compare him to one of his contemporaries, Jan Vermeer. Instead of broad patches of color, Vermeer applies the paint in imperceptible touches of paint, so delicately applied that light seems to emanate directly from their source. The slashing strokes of Frans Hals are reduced to miniature pearls of paint, so carefully balanced and placed, as we're unaware of the presence of the medium at all. It took 2 centuries for Hals' paintings to be accepted at all. Because of their radical style, no one wanted to purchase the paintings because they were just too loose, too free. They looked unfinished. As a matter of fact, some of them were only sold for a few shillings at the time. It wasn't until the Impressionist Revolution, at the close of the 19th century, that there was a renewed interest in this rebel painter. Our artistic journey is now going to take us onto a major highway. This major highway is the revolution of Impressionism. Now, Impressionism was a twofold revolution. Not only did artists change the methods of their paintings, but what they painted. They began to take their studios from the indoors to the outdoors. They painted things around them, slices of life, en plein air, as the French call it. But they also painted very rapidly, applying one stroke over another in order to capture the atmosphere of a day, perhaps a beautiful day like today. So Impressionism was a true revolution. The self-conscious, studious realism of the past gave way to painting that could be called slices of life. Suggestion and spontaneity took the place of studious, systematic approaches to painting. If we are tempted to linger here for a while on our travels through this new land of modern painting, it's because Impressionism lifts ordinary subjects and situations beyond the commonplace to an idyllic beauty that we all enjoy. I know you'd like to linger here for a while in this land of Impressionism. I would too. But we're going to move on. We're going to move on to perhaps an even more exciting land, the land of Post-Impressionism. This painting, I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's the painting of that fellow, who cut off his ear, Vincent van Gogh. This is one of Vincent van Gogh's many self-portraits. Now there's a huge span of 300 years between Frans Hal's painting of a young man and this self-portrait. The previous flat patches have now given way to thick, repetitive, vibrant strokes of pure color. They seem to radiate from the face like rays from the sun. As you can see, Van Gogh has made little attempt to blend the colors together. The yellows, ochres, and reds are placed side by side in deliberate distortion. Van Gogh also had his dark side, as witnessed in this painting called Night Cafe. Immediately after painting it, he wrote to his brother,
"I have tried to express the terrible passions of humanity by means of red and green."
Van Gogh was often portrayed in biographies and movies as a mad genius who painted in moods of artistic frenzy without careful preparation. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. These seemingly unplanned works were in fact carefully done after many experimental studies. In another quote to his brother Theo, he said,
"I want to say something comforting as music. I want to paint men and women with that something of the eternal which the halo used to symbolize, and which we seek to give by the actual radiance and vibration of our colorings."
The theory of applying broken color was not limited to the emotionally charged paintings of Van Gogh's. We see it used in a more classical, systematic way in this painter, Georges Seurat, in his wonderful painting, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. Seurat approached the painting with a scientific attitude, making at least 20 preliminary drawings and perhaps even 40 color studies. He not only considered the effects of certain color dots laid side by side, he was also meticulous in his use of repeating certain concave and convex shapes, achieving an optimal relationships of line, shape, and color. As a result, the finished work, unlike Van Gogh's emotionally charged paintings, Seurat's is devoid of any pretense towards passion and unbridled emotion. The calculated diminishing sizes of the figures against the larger shapes in the foreground shadows tends to carry the eye back into the painting like stage scenes. The figures appear like mannequins in a dream, and the entire island seems unreal. Well, hold on tight now, because the next part of our visual journey is going to take us into space. Not real space, but visual space. If we were to search for a common quality shared by all modern artists, it would be a continual tendency to preserve the integrity of two-dimensional space. That's basically a fancy way of saying the paintings are flat. The illusion of depth is minimized and then eventually destroyed in favor of two dimensions. We look at a modern painting, not into them. Now let's take a look at an early, more romantic treatment of space by Antoine Watteau. This early 18th century painting is an imaginary vision of aristocratic frivolity. The artist here depicts the French nobility engaging in flirtatious poses as they are about to embark upon a mythical island. When you look at the Watteau painting, you have a tendency to search the painting. In the foreground, we find cherubs as they look like smoke coming up from the boat. In the foreground, we see roses and Greek statues. We're encouraged to search them. Watteau invites us into the painting like an imaginary window. The illusion of three-dimensional space heightens the mystical quality of the painting. Now, that's quite different than this modern painting by Paul Cézanne. Here, the space is absolutely flat. We don't look into the painting as we did Watteau's. We look at the painting. While Watteau's painting is visually endless, Cézanne's is complete. Because the treatment of space is so shallow, we sense Cézanne's paintings all at once. Cézanne purposely destroys the traditional use of perspective. Here we see an intellectual rather than a romantic use of nature. Unlike Watteau, Cézanne's subject is a real place. Cézanne's not pretending to romanticize nature or even copy it. Rather, he's attempting to create a symbol of human feeling, independent of any associations. Remember, Cézanne's is symbolic. That's very important. The same effort to flatten space in favor of a unified relationship of form and color can be seen in his still lives as well. Into the entire painting to act more as visual forces rather than three-dimensional real objects in space. Trying to retain the integrity of form while creating a unit, Cézanne used a continual weaving of modulating colors, carefully varying hard and soft edges and breaking contours of otherwise. He sets up a tension that removes the objects from their natural pictorial form. The painting simply does not look real. After 1890, Cézanne's brushstrokes became even more abstract to the point where the portraits took on the look of masks. It won't be long in our travels that after we leave Cézanne, we come to Picasso. It's obvious that Picasso went further than anything proposed by Cézanne. Now the form breaks down to the point of the face, the figure, the background. They simply slide into one another into a process of disintegration. This drastic move towards the dissolution. Now I know that you know what's around the corner on our next trip towards modern art. Eventually, artists like Mondrian felt no need to paint any semblance of real form. To the modern artist, found in the dynamics of pure line, form, and color. Now the subject disappears completely. The painter finds himself arranging geometrical shapes of pure color, bounded by heavy vertical and horizontal bars of black. This eventual reduction of elements to just a few lines and colors began with the artist's response to forms in nature. To quote from Mondrian, he said, "I'm a living machine, capable of realizing in a pure manner the essence of art." Mondrian, like all modern painters, was trying to express a form of artistic unity similar to our early Egyptian artists. Both really were seeking a higher mystical unity that man has always sensed was in the universe. Well, we've come to the end of our travels. And no doubt you probably have more questions than answers. But that's just as it should be. Remember, a great work of art is always a symbol of human emotion, not a literal representation of life. To new frontiers, because I want to leave you with a desire to explore the ends of the visual world. You've visited the land of enrichment, and now there's no turning back.